Go right ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon and welcome to the Portsmouth Coffee Talks Evening Edition show. My name is James Slim Overton and I'm here with our co-host Leah Drake Stitt, and we're waiting on Thomas the Colonel Chapman. I guess he'll tune in later. But we have a special guest with us tonight as we celebrate Women's History Month this month. We have amazing women that have already been on and that are going to be on, and plus tonight is no exception. We have a great lady here, Dr. LaFrancis Rodgers-Rose, and Leah will introduce her and start off the conversation. But before we do that, I'd like to say something about her personally. She is a heart transplant buddy of mine, and last year at a support meeting, she announced that she has been a recipient for 20 years now. I guess going into 2023 is going into the 21st year. And I first met LaFrancis, excuse me, Dr. Rodgers-Rose, when I was in the hospital waiting on her heart. She came to visit quite often, and it was very helpful, some of the advice she gave me. And it was encouraging that she was already, I think, 12 years out during that time or something like that. So I'm looking at why I was concerned about a major operation like that. And then I'm looking at her coming in there and said, well, I've had my heart for 12 years. And she got hers during a time where it was kind of early on in the transplant stage, at least over at Centura. Right. And I think I was blessed to be able to have the LVAD while I was waiting. They didn't have that technology when you were waiting, LaFrancis, and so you had to stay in the hospital and wait for that.
Absolutely.
To become available. Mm-hmm. And you went there for what?
Nearly 4 months.
Yeah, just waiting. And and I had the heart pump, so I was out there for 3 years, walking around and doing everything I wanted to do. So it was certainly a blessing to have you come into my life at that point. And then as we talked, we found out we knew a lot of people. We both were from Portsmouth, or originally you grew up in Norfolk, but both were from Portsmouth and had friends in common. So that was meant to happen. So I just wanted to get that out there in front before we start the conversation with Rodgers-Rose. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Well, I'm always thrilled to be able to introduce a former Greyhound, or always a Greyhound, not a former Greyhound, a Greyhound. So
and
it is.
That's what she played basketball.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
She didn't ride the bench.
How about that? Like James. It is indeed my pleasure to introduce to some and to reintroduce to others Dr. LaFrancis Rodgers-Rose. Dr. Rose is a graduate of IC Norcom High School in the class of 1954. And in 1958, she graduated with honors from Morgan State University with a major in sociology, anthropology, and history. An MA from Fisk University in 1960, focusing on race and culture. Cultural anthropology in 1964, she was the first Black woman to receive a degree in sociology from Iowa and the 9th Black woman in the United States to receive the doctorate in sociology. Dr. Rodgers-Rose taught sociology and African American studies for more than 30 years at some of the top colleges and universities in the country, starting with St. Olaf College and Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio, 1970 to 1972, then at Princeton University from 73 to 1988, introducing the first course at Princeton taught there on the Black woman in 1975. She also taught courses at Rutgers University and the University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Rodgers-Rose's last teaching position was at Drew University from 1988 to 1996, where she led the first group of Drew students to study Black culture and history in Egypt and Senegal. She has lectured extensively throughout the United States on topics dealing with Black history and culture, the Black woman, Black family, Black identity, youth motivation, rites of passage, parenting skill development, cultural diversity, and various aspects of health. She is an editor of the acclaimed volume, The Black Woman, the first comprehensive social science book published in Black women's studies on the Black woman by Black women. Dr. Rodgers-Rose is co-author with her late brother, Dr. James T. Rodgers, of Strategies for Resolving Conflict in Black Male and Female Relationships, 1985, co-author of Every Black Woman Should Wear a Red Dress, 2001, and River of Tears, The Politics of Black Women's Health, 1997, with Dolores P. Aldrich. Her most recent book, 2011, co-edited with Zakiya Zamai, is Healing Black Women from Violence. Her latest, The Black Woman from Antiquity to the Present, will be published in 2023. Now, Dr. Rose's resume goes on and on and on. She has done some amazing things. She was a founding member and past national president of the Association of Black Psychologists. It was under her administration that the organization incorporated as an association. She's past national president of the Association of Social Behavior Scientists and founder and CEO of the International Black Women's Congress. Dr. Rodgers-Rose is also a member of the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations and the American Sociological Association. Now, the one thing that she's a member of Delta Sigma Theta. She's a member of the Divine Nine. But the one thing I wanted to get to was that she was given the high honor and installed as Nana. You have to say the rest for me.
Nana Opakani Osatwa Sufi the First.
All right, and this was in Ghana.
Yes.
Well, Dr. Rose, I wasn't chosen as a Nana, but when I was in Ghana, they did give me the name Afua Jiawa. So I feel very, very much related to you right now, okay? But and I've also gone to Senegal, so I think we have a lot to talk about on today, Dr. Rose, and we are really excited about having you on, this wonderful Norcom graduate. So James, I'm going to turn it over to you after that introduction.
Okay, thank you for that wonderful introduction. And we even got today another 15-page bio chronologizing her life from college, and she graduated from Morgan State University, HBCU, and you mentioned the other universities, didn't you, Leah?
Yeah. I mentioned Fisk University and Rutgers and the University of Iowa. So she has just studied all over the place.
Yes, and used that knowledge she got to spread out in many different areas.
But James, you know, it also goes back to Dr. Rose, to what Mr. Norcom said when he was developing this school for Black kids. And he says to teach them what they ought to know to be men and women and how to live the abundant life. Well, you have truly done what he worked so hard to establish. And I know he's smiling down on you on today.
Yes, indeed. And I, I'll start off. I always like to start off, when you start off with me, I like to go back to the beginning, because I believe there's a beginning for everyone. And a lot of people have that calling or know their purpose early in life, or they don't, or they find their purpose along their journey. But I just want to ask you, and I'm Dr. Rodgers-Rose, I'm gonna call you like I call you.
Call me LaFrancis, it's okay.
I call you LaFrancis, that's what I call you all the time. So people will understand, and I do respect, your title. But anyway, coming up, you started out in Norfolk, and then your family moved to Portsmouth.
Yeah.
And obviously, all the things you have done, you were a good student, coming all the way up through grade school and at IC Norfolk. It didn't start into college, because some people don't get good in the books until they get to college, because it's a more serious situation.
You flip the switch. I used to say to people that I was my mother's slowest child. There was 4 of us.
Wow, what about the other ones?
I am her only minted PhD.
All right now, okay.
So you can start from the bottom. You never know where you're going to end. But
amen.
I come from a family, I guess, of I guess sort of ordinary Black folks who just do what we do on an everyday basis. I born in Norfolk and moved to Portsmouth before I was 6, because my father at that time, Reverend Carroll,
Mhm.
Rodgers Sr. was an ordained minister but had problems with alcohol and abuse.
Mhm.
So my mother had to run away.
Mhm.
And I just tell people she ran a long ways away.
Mhm.
She ran all the way to
All the
Portsmouth.
way to Portsmouth.
But you know, in those days, we didn't have all the transportation and things that we have. The only way that you could get from Norfolk to Portsmouth was by ferry,
That's right.
or go all the way around across the Jordan Bridge. And you really would have to have a car.
Mhm.
So I started off downtown on Chestnut Street and went to Chestnut Street Elementary School.
Uh-huh.
I like to sell because some people don't remember what that area might have looked like. But there were 3 schools there. And so you went to first, second, and third grade at Chestnut Street.
Mhm.
You crossed over the yard. You went to George Peabody
Mhm.
for 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th grade.
Mhm.
Then you went across the yard and you went to I.C. Norcom High School from
Mhm.
the 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th, 12th grade. So I only spent 1 year at the airline Turnpike School.
Uh-huh. Mhm.
Mhm. So we were the 3rd graduating class at Airline Turnpike, 1954. And all of that was to avert the Supreme Court decision. You know, you look at Craddock High and I.C. Norcom, they were the exact 2 schools.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, and it started there, and then, but you had early on, you had some influences, I think, to
Lots of
as far
influences.
as being. Go ahead.
I chronology, my first grade teacher, Ms. Richardson, I don't know her last name, but I do know. She said to me one day, I have all the time in the world. You're going to read this page or not.
Mhm.
And at that point, we were reading by rote.
Uh-huh.
And this was See Jane Run,
See
Jane
Jane
Run,
Run. Yes. Yes.
See Jane Run. And
Yeah.
you know, I'm crying through
Uh,
all these tears and all of that. But you know, I imagine learn how to read.
Mhm.
So I used to tell my students, I'm a slow reader. I read every word that I say because that's how I learn how to read.
Mhm.
Also, but I can read.
Amen.
In addition to that, I don't read a paper twice.
Uh-huh.
If I say this was an A paper, it was. If it's a D paper, it is. At the college level, I say, if you want the grade changed, go to the dean.
Mm.
Go straight to the dean because I'm not changing.
Uh-huh.
Because what I read, I know I read. And so I take a lot of notes.
Uh-huh.
I get so many yellow pads around my house because I know the only way that I retain is that I got to write it down.
Mhm.
For
Mhm.
some things, I got to repeat it over and over again. So, but Miss Richardson was significant in my life. I guess for my high school, it was Mary D. Branch.
Miss Branch.
And,
Yes.
and you know, she was a mathematician.
Yes. Yes.
I think a genius.
Mhm.
And she believed that all of her students, homeroom students, must take every math class they had at I.C. Norcom.
Mhm.
So I took everything. We had 3.5 years of math. I have 3.5 years of math.
Mhm.
And so, and we were always in competition between the 2 sections who had the smartest kids. But I was also smart enough to know that I don't need to hang around with anybody dumber than I am.
Mhm.
So all of my friends were smarter than me.
Mhm.
And then, you know, I played basketball and
Mhm.
I was a cheerleader. So nobody expected that I would have a PhD. I'm absolutely sure.
So Dr. Francis, you said basketball and cheerleader?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I was busy all year long doing something else. I graduated from IC Norcom. Thank God. I might have had a C+ average. No way. Yeah. Now my sister Cynthia was a salutatorian of her class.
Uh-huh.
And I think my brother Carl might have been a valedictorian.
Yeah, I think Carol was the valedictorian.
But for sure, I know he was a president of student body and all that other kind of,
Exactly.
you know, good stuff. And I know at one point when I was graduating, somebody said, Cynthia Rodgers is your sister? We were so diametrically opposite. I would stay in people. Because if something happened, they would say, go find LaFrancis because she had to be in the center of it.
Uh-huh.
So, but anyway, that Miss Branch was my, for sure, favorite teacher.
And we all have those inspirations. And during the time you graduated from IC Norcom and going into college, that was during the height of the civil rights movement. And
No, civil rights hadn't quite started yet.
Started.
That was
It wasn't the height,
because
but
the
it was
Supreme-
almost the
58.
beginning.
The Supreme Court decision came May 17th, 1954. So I was already a senior.
Yeah.
So I didn't have any dilemmas of, what school I'm going to go to. And I remember Mr. Waters saying,
Yes.
I don't know whether he said it to us or whether he said it to the faculty and the faculty told us. I don't know. But he said that this was going to be the death of Black education.
Oh boy, he spoke truth to power.
He could see.
He spoke truth.
He could see what this meant. Because I like to say that there are only 2 historical Black high schools left in the state of Virginia. And one is Booker T. Washington High School in North, and the other one is our alma mater, IC Norcom High School in Portsmouth.
That's
Virginia.
right. That's right.
And see, we got some diehard alumni.
Yes,
from
we
IC
do.
Norcom. No,
Yes, we do.
Take your hands off of us. Do whatever you want to do, but leave us alone.
Yeah,
So,
thank you for correcting me. If anybody correct me.
Then it hadn't started. And I missed all of that. The peak of this resistance to integration was 1958-59, when the state of Virginia closed down all schools.
That's right.
And I don't know what was happening in Portsmouth, but in Norfolk, they constantly celebrate. I think it was the 9 or 15 students, right, who integrated those schools in Norfolk and the kinds of things. And, I was just telling somebody recently, this American society have no sense of history or culture. And so we so quickly forget. So people now talk about, integration or talk about what happened in 1959 as if it were so long ago. But in history, it was yesterday.
Yes. Yes.
And so we can't buy into other people's definition of what long ago. So, if I've got my mother's mother was born during enslavement. You see, so I don't have to go back far to find out what Virginia, South Carolina, North Carolina, or any of the southern states looked like and acts like.
That's why you can't wipe that out, because in every sense of the word, that's recent history compared to the history of the world being here.
So then I forgot, Leah, one other thing is I became a sociologist and not a psychologist. So my doctorate is in sociology.
Did I say psychology?
But I'm trained as a social psychologist.
Okay.
Kind of mix those two up. But I like to say to James that I'm a sociologist because graduating from high school, even before I graduated, I've always had this whole sense of justice and wanting to see justice. So I early on thought I wanted to be a lawyer. So, in those days we had downtown Portsmouth that had, 4 Black movies. We had, lawyer businesses. We had just a whole community that took place someplace between High Street and County. So one day walking downtown, because I lived downtown on Queen Street. So I was like in the heart of what somebody would call the quote hood, which was in the hood in the Black culture. So walking down the street one day, I saw Lawyer Overton. And me not being ashamed or whatever, I walked up to him and he doesn't know me from Adams. And I said, Lawyer Overton, my name is LaFrancis, and I want to be a lawyer. What did you major in college? He said sociology.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to Morgan State and majored in sociology because I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, and that changed sort of immediately, and I never left sociology. Thanks to James' dad.
He led you in the right direction.
I'm a sociologist today. I could have been like 16 or so, you know. But in those days, you knew who the leaders were.
Exactly.
You see what I'm saying? We weren't separated so far from people that we would be afraid.
Right. They're very approachable. Very approachable.
Yeah. And that's so we've got kids who are growing up and don't have any idea of, quote, what a middle-class person is.
Exactly.
But in my block, my 900 block, 800 block of Queen Street, when I was growing up, there was 2 teachers in that 800 block. And then there was also Mr. Burt, who worked for the post office. Then there were a couple of sisters who had jobs like secretary. And then we had just us regular folks with my mother doing domestic work. So we were all like blended in there, so that you got to see Miss Shepherd having us come to her house and washing our hands and sitting at the table and giving us a sandwich. And how do you behave, at a table. So that integration of culture was always there for me. That's the 40s and the 50s.
Yes, yes.
Welcome, Colonel.
Hey, look, thank you.
Acknowledge you were here.
Yes, had a little technical difficulties there, but I'm glad I'm here. But Dr. Francis, I am so glad that you're getting this longitudinal citing of history, that how you came up, and it gave several lessons to the young folks out there that are out here in electron lands. One of them I like to pick out is I think it was Mrs. Branch that told you to take or whoever it was, to take all the math you could.
Yeah, Miss Branch.
Yes, Miss Branch. That is a lesson that we need to teach our young folks, not to take the easiest route out, and trying to achieve for the bare minimum. Because if you get the bare minimum, if you just try to achieve the bare minimum, you'll get the bare minimum. So that's one lesson that I picked up on. The other one was you are who you hang out with. And I say that when I see these young kids that they want to be in the in crowd, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, they'll hang out with the bad crowd. And if you're out there with this crowd, you can be easily swept up in it.
That's true.
And that was another lesson. But having studied sociology, and you mentioned the word middle class, can you define middle class? And I guess there's 2 different middle class. There's a white middle class and a people of color middle class.
Yeah, well, class is all of it is make-believe stuff. You realize that. All of this is make-believe. So we participate in this make-believe world that based on definitions. So definitions move from one place to another place. Middle class, when I was growing up, which the word did not exist in my language, but these were people who were achieving, people who had regular jobs that paid a salary in such a way that their children had a little bit more than what I had, as what somebody else could call poor. And they were, this middle class, my growing up, were educated that they had college degrees, educated that they as James' dad went to law school, we also had medical doctors when I'm growing up, and I can see them. I went to these doctors. They were my doctors, right?
Mhm.
And most of them lived in the Black community.
Mhm. Mhm.
They might have had the best house on the block, but they were in the block. So
Mhm.
they were not strangers to us
Mhm.
as kids growing up, right? So now sociologically, you can also base middle class on income alone. Anybody after they do the analysis and they break it down, anybody making maybe today, I don't know, $60,000. See, because money is funny,
Mhm.
you know, $60,000 today is not what $15,000 were in I said 1949 or 50. That was a lot of money.
Mhm.
So class is tricky. Yeah. But
And,
basically,
and it's
that's
kind of funny, you know, when I was coming up, you know, I've always taught that and was heard, you know, as historically, say Cavalier Manor was the largest collection of African-American middle class folks in the country at one time.
well, you know, it was also the first community built by class
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
Black people in
Yeah.
the United States.
Mhm.
So my cousin who got married early was one of the she and her husband was one of the youngest two couples that were able to buy a house in Cavalier Minor. And when they both, their ancestors now, when they both died, they were still living in that same house.
Mm.
And I say to her daughter, I can drive to that house blindfold.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So Cavalier Minor was special. And then even as it grew out, it was still Cavalier Minor, but then that's where you started getting your, I would then call these people your upper middle class,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? They don't have the little box houses. They now got, you know, huge houses that they done turned the garage into what we call the family room.
Family room, yes. Yes.
Close it in. It is like nobody else. No, you're not going into the garage.
Uh-huh.
You're going into the major place where we sit and have our fun and our parties and all that good stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But you know, Dr. Francis, and you're so right, in as much as in our communities growing up, we went to church with our teachers and our principals and our doctors. You know, we went to the grocery store with our teachers and our principals and our doctors. So we saw these people on a daily basis. They were a part of our daily lives, you know, and we were all there together. We were all there together, regardless as to what your profession was.
Mhm.
Segregation did that.
Mm-hmm.
Segregation made us we haven't had that kind of unity.
Never. Not
Never,
anymore.
never
Not
again.
anymore. We've lost it.
But absolutely, I grew up in Fourth Baptist Church,
Mm-hmm.
and we would easily go around from Fourth Baptist to Ebenezer
Mm-hmm.
to Emmanuel. You know, we would just like we were hopping churches.
Right.
You know what I'm
Right.
saying? So because one, we were going to school with everybody,
Mm-hmm.
so you knew everybody.
Exactly.
You got to, so whether they were in Prentice Park or wherever they were, we knew them because we were all in the same, particularly when we got to high school.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Until we got to high school. I just, Chestnut Street, I've got like three buddies that we started first grade together and graduated from high school together, and we're still together.
Mm-hmm. And you know, and when you go to other places, people find it strange that you have maintained those relationships with the people you went to elementary school with and the people that you grew up with. they find it so strange. I know I've gone places and say, oh, you still talk to your elementary school friends? Yes. And your high school friends? Yes, they are my friends, you know?
Well, the people that I just called my cousin,
Uh-huh.
there's no blood there.
Thank you.
There's no blood
Got a
there.
lot of them.
Fictive kin.
There's no blood. They're not fictive. They are real kin. So, you know, in the psychology, sociology literature, they call them fictive. They're not fictive.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
These are blood relatives. Blood that when we were however small, we might cut our finger.
Cut your finger.
What we would do, look, we do this one. What's your hand for?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I'm saying? And so right now, my niece, then who was, her mother and I grew up together. You know, she's a medical doctor, James. She checks on me. She makes sure that some of the things that's happening, but her daughter does not know that there's not any blood, biological blood between us. If I go up to Maryland to visit her, she introduces me as her aunt.
Uh-huh.
So now that all her friends would say, was her how's Aunt LaFrancis doing?
Mm-hmm.
But that's some people who are old enough to remember the name of Audrey Bird. But that's her granddad, Mr. Bird, who I think may have been the first. And also, he was the Masonic Hall that's down at the corner of Queen High School. He helped build that place.
Okay, okay.
Oh, yeah. So you could look, Sidney Bird, you could look him up, historian.
Well, Dr. Francis, where did the term fictive kin come from? I know I heard it in sociology.
You heard of sociology and psychology.
Right.
Because white people didn't know what to call it.
Okay.
So they made it like it was fiction. Like we're crazy. No, we know who our relatives are. My relative is my girlfriends that I grew up from since I was 7, all the way through.
Yes.
Now, sometimes we get angry with each other and all that stuff, but you cannot come between us. No. See, those were the times, Leo, when you would all get dressed up alike.
Yes,
You know,
exactly. I got pictures of my girlfriend from my community. We're in New York and we got this dress, we're dressed alike.
Yeah, you did that before the sisters were dressed alike.
Those were the days. I don't know that brothers had that same kind of bonding, but they were very, very close. They bond in a different kind of way.
Exactly.
But the bonding is there. And it was no fraternity and all that kind of stuff. These are bonding from when you're growing up, 9, 10, 11 years old, and you find this, you know, and you're lucky when you get a group of you. You know, because a lot of people, they just got one great buddy all my life. But then some, you got about 5 or 6. And my sister and I are the last 2 from Queen Street. Last 2 left. And but yeah, so I call them my cousins. So my cousin, James Moody, who died 12 years or so ago now. But he was from the Catholic school, Our Lady of Victory. But his moms and my moms were best friends on Queen Street. Well, Jimmy left the US like in 1970, 71 and went to Europe. He was a musician, he was a painter, just everything. And so he lived all over Europe. He got sick in like 2005 or 2006. And you know, you're in another country and you're fine, you're a foreigner, but they're not gonna take care of you.
Exactly.
So when he got sick, they sent him home. He had my dad's telephone number that we still have here in Norfolk. That's my dad who got sober, was sober for 25 years and did a lot of great things afterwards. So I let people know he didn't stay wherever he was. He had that old number and he called it. And my sister answered the phone and she said, come home. He came down to Norfolk. He stayed in the house with us. We got him all of his Social Security and all this other kind of stuff. And he moved in a senior citizen building right around the corner. And we buried him. And when we buried him, they said he had 3 cousins. Me, my sister, and my cousin Rita, who recently died. That's who were listed. That's not fictive.
No, it's not fictive at all.
That's
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 blood.
my
That's
cousin.
family. That's
Yeah,
family.
that's family.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
LaFrancis,
Amen.
let's move on to your educational journey, because after you left Morgan State, I think the next educational stop you made was Fisk University. Am I correct?
Yes. Mhm.
Mhm.
And Fisk University, I guess that was your first master's. You were working on your first master's, and I hope I'm correct on that. But if not, but being at Fisk, you got to. The colonel mentioned earlier, you are who you hang around with. You got to be in the company of some people, and you can name drop early
Yeah.
on.
Name drop, but when they were there,
When they
Mhm.
were
and
there,
that
yeah,
is Fisk, 1958 to 1960.
right.
They were just regular students.
Mhm.
And so at Fisk, and Fisk is a small school,
Right.
and we only had maybe 30, 35, 40 graduate students.
Mhm.
So at Fisk, in the chemistry department, was Marion Berry.
Oh, wow.
So Marion Berry, see, people don't know how smart he was.
Mhm. Brilliant.
And was president of the student council before he
Mhm.
came to
Mhm.
Fisk. And even after he got his master's, we both were in the same class in 1960, he had a degree or a scholarship to go to the University of Memphis, Tennessee, Memphis in Tennessee, right? Yeah,
Mhm.
University.
Yeah.
Because he was from Memphis. And I think he must have tried it for 2 or 3 weeks, and it was too much for him. It got on his nerves. And so then he left and then came and, followed Martin Luther King and all those people.
Mhm.
But so Marion at that time was the president of the graduate student group, and I was the vice president.
Mhm.
So, and we were both born in 1936.
Mhm.
Then another person that was at that same point, so in the spring of 1959, was a student sit-in.
Mhm.
And so we know about the Fisk student sit-ins and who
Mhm.
came out of that. So who came out of that was James Bevel.
Wow.
And so James Bevel and I were, good friends. There wasn't that many graduate people around who were 22, 21 years old. So we all pretty much went to eat at the same place.
Mhm.
And that 59, 60 year, I and 2 of my roommates had rented a house from the university. That had been a faculty house, and the faculty members were on sabbatical. So that 59 year for us became sort of like the meeting place.
Mhm.
And whoever was talking about something radical other than sit-in.
Mhm.
So as I say to people, it was always 2 contingencies within the movement.
Mhm.
And one was following the nonviolent Lawson.
Mhm.
And many of those who went in that direction were younger than we were at the age of 21 and 22. And so in that group then, coming from out of the American Baptist Theological Seminary, was James Bevel, Bernard Lafayette,
Oh, wow.
and John Lewis.
Wow.
Now, Bernard and John were freshmen.
Mhm.
And so I know at least once, if not twice, they were at the house.
Mhm.
But they weren't saying anything because we're graduate students.
Yeah.
We're 5 years old, so we're dictating whatever. But and I still have one of my very good friends who's, if they do anything about the sit-ins, they'll call Angela. But I did not know Bevel's wife, Diane Nash.
Diane Nash. Yeah.
Diane Nash was junior.
Wow.
But because we were graduate students, she didn't hang out at the grad. But they got married maybe like the year after, like 1961. So Bevel, met her at doing this movement and all that stuff. So I say to people, it came 1960, I had a choice. Do I go south with this movement, or do I go back to Washington, D.C. and get married? Because at that point I was engaged to be married. So I went to DC, went to DC.
Mm.
And the rest of it is like history.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Well, that's quite a history of individuals who was in your presence.
Well, you know, Fisk was like a hotbed.
Yes, it
for that
was.
reason,
Yes,
you
it
know what I mean?
was.
And I say to people, Bevel became the theoretician
Mm-hmm.
for Martin Luther King. So
Mhm.
all of that direct action you see, what looks like crazy stuff,
Mm-hmm.
that was James Bevel,
Yes, yes.
including the march across the Pettus Bridge.
Pettus Bridge, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
John Lewis happened to be a student
Uh-huh.
in one group who they ain't had no fear.
Exactly.
No,
Mm-hmm.
I could never do any of that. I participated in some marches, but sit in, no. I was in that group, said, no. We got to figure out what it means.
And Francis, kind of fast forwarding to your, because in the interest of time, because we will publish your resume, but fast forwarding to your jobs, you know, that you had where you had to break the color barriers, and especially that first job you had. What prepared you for that? Because during those times it was quite contentious, you know, to be in situations where you were the only Black. Like I believe that was your first job. I'm not sure. Were you the only faculty member?
Yeah, you know, I don't know whether you received that, James. We just sent out the interview that I had at St. Olaf
Got that? Yes.
about a month ago now.
Mm-hmm.
If you're on my little feed list, I think you ought to be. That would be there where they interviewed me as the first Black faculty member at St. Olaf College in Northfield, Minnesota. But it wasn't because they remembered me.
Mm-hmm.
It was because I started writing my own memoir.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got to that point where I am now on my way to teaching. And so I said, well, let me see what St. Olaf College says about me. So, you know, I'm on the line trying to Google my name, see could I find myself. Couldn't find myself any place.
Mm-hmm.
So as fate or the universe or God or however you see that universe piece, I had a legal case and I was talking to my lawyer and she said, oh, I've got another client who's from St. Olaf. I said, what? So anyway, she put us together, you know, by mutual emails. And when I said this to this person there who is the vice president for affirmative action that I taught at St. Olaf in 1964, she said, what? They had Black faculty in 1960. So then she kind of started the ball rolling.
Mm-hmm.
So in a year and a half, I now, you know, I've been unearthed. They found all these pictures of me that go back to 1964 that I don't even remember these pictures. I've had about 10 days ago now, they did a all university kind of Zoom for me. And, you know, people could come in. I've unearthed. So somebody asked me, so what did your students think about you? Because we know in 1964, they're probably the first Black faculty member that you ever had. At St. Olaf only had one Black student, as I recall. They had some African students, but African-American students, when I was there, I think they only had one. But but out of this interview has come at least 4 people that I taught now 65 years ago. You know, they're in their 70s.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that person had just the greatest, I just need to frame it,
Mm-hmm.
of the impact that I had on his life and introducing him to Black people for real and
Mm-hmm.
understanding, and how he then went on. He's been doing a lot of media stuff. Small world. He was on the Board of Education for TNEC.
New Jersey?
Public, yeah.
Teaneck,
And
New
that's where my sister lived.
Okay, I lived in Teaneck for a while.
Well, that's where Cynthia lived for many years.
Uh-huh.
Her daughter still lives in Teaneck.
Uh-huh.
Her daughter is a retired math teacher
Mm-hmm.
from Teaneck's junior high school.
Mm-hmm.
But he hasn't he left me his telephone number and everything, and I responded twice, and I haven't heard from him, so I hope he's still well. But so for me, because I have this personality that I've always had, you know, since I was little.
Since Judge Overton.
Look,
Since Judge Overton.
look, as a second grader,
Mhm.
the Catholic school wouldn't take me.
Okay,
They took my sister,
but not you.
no, and my mother would not separate us.
Uh-huh.
So that meant she had to go to public school too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's something, you're born with certain kinds of traits. We know that, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't fazed by being the only Black faculty. I'll tell you where I just came from. I just came from out of Fisk. Then I go to the University of Iowa. I'm the only Black student
Mm-hmm.
in the graduate program at sociology at the University of Iowa. And I'm there for 4 years, and no, 3 years. But at my last year, I'm voted the best student in the program.
Mm.
And given all these little awards and books and all that other kind of stuff. So even there, as being the only Black student, I am who I am. So being at St. Olaf, I mean, my girlfriend and I, she was white because I was the only Black person around. We took down the Democratic Party of Rice County for Eugene McCarthy
Mm-hmm.
in
Mm-hmm.
1968.
All right now.
Yeah, we were organized, and I was vice president for the Human Relations Council that they had. As I just took my little African Portsmouth, Virginia self right on. So it was no problem. I had to stand up many times, just me by myself. And I know one of my colleagues, as I was leaving, said, I didn't always agree with you,
Mm-hmm.
but I admired your ability to stand up for your principles.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And you definitely did that at the International Black Women's Congress.
yeah.
And were you
This
one
is-
of the Were you one of the founders of?
No, I am the founder.
You are the founder. I knew. I see. Yes, yes. And tell us, how did you begin to pull it all together?
I don't even really know, except that, coming out of the movement.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was sort of like on the groundwork of the women's movement,
Mm-hmm.
predominantly white, coming in the 60s. So, by the 64, I've got a PhD.
Mm-hmm.
For some of the white women in Northfield, I'm a role model.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they're pretty much housewives.
Right.
And my best girlfriend today from Northfield, she's now 90. And I know her husband used to be concerned with the amount of time that I would be spending at the house with her and the kids, because he thought I was radicalizing them.
Uh-huh.
So when I was at Case Western Reserve, I don't even share this a lot, but I was in a circle of women. I think it was 10 of us, or either 11 of us. And it was just to digress and understand our roles and all of this other kind of stuff. Well, I was the only Black woman in that circle. And I can remember that one of the radical white women, T. Grace Atkinson, came to Cleveland in the winter to make a speech. And she said at that, it was a big church in Cleveland Heights. She said at that meeting, among other things, but she said, I'm tired of people generalizing oppression. She said, if your husband is oppressing you, then you need to off him.
Off? She said off him?
Off him. You got to look up T. Grace Atkinson.
Okay.
Huh?
All right.
And those white women went berserk. They talked about her so badly. And the only thing that they could say was how she came in and she had this fur coat on, and she just dropped the fur coat on the floor as she came up. None of them dealt with the radicalism of this woman.
Of the woman.
So, yeah. So we're now dealing with today in the women's movement, which that's how I got the Black women's movement,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
where they are generalizing about men.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
There are some good men
That's right.
out there. So she said, in her way, if you read T. Grace Atkinson, you will see this is just a radical 1960s woman. Because this is back in those women were just talking junk. They weren't taking any prisoners. They weren't taking any prisoners. That radicals, but they softened it and softened it. So now they make it possible for anybody to be a feminist. All you got to do is to say, my name is LaFrancis, and okay, we got you. You don't know what my thoughts are. You don't know what I believe in. So, and then Black women have never been like white women. We came from a whole different history.
Exactly.
So then coming from out of that movement, not being a feminist, then so what am I?
A radical.
No, I'm a woman. I'm a Black woman.
Okay, all right, okay.
What does it mean to be a Black woman? And that's where the organization started.
Okay, okay.
And because by that time, I was sort of like on the Speakers Bureau. So I was meeting Black women all over the country. And I was good at writing down names, getting people's cards, and all of that. So at some point, I just have this large group. I don't mean large, like I have thousands. I'm not a sorority. And that's not, Delta's a Delta. An AK is an AK. That's one thing. But in this small group of women that I have, we got about 130 life members. So I was just talking to one of our members, and I said we could have a conference just on conference theme this year is on Black women reframing the 21st century using our African spirituality. So we give out this major award every year called the Only Award, which then identifies these women who just speak truth to justice, who've dedicated their lives to this. So I said, we've got 100 and some people. And if you get my book or get any of our previous programs, you can see the names of these women. And some of them you'll say, wow, they were there. And then some of them you've never heard of in your life. The vast majority you've never heard of. But every now and then we'll get somebody like a Sonia Sanchez or Betty Shabazz, that you'll say, oh, wow. Or Ayanna Van Zandt. See, I like to tell people that Ayanna Van Zandt for 10 years used to come to our little small conference and she would do our spiritual workshops. But then at some point, she caught on fire. Yeah. And we haven't seen her since. But I think I may have talked to her maybe twice. I used to have all her telephone numbers. I don't have any of them now, But she was in the space. I do have books showing her much tinier and, and all of that. But yeah, so it grew out of then our trying to define ourselves for ourselves using our Black perspective. And that's what my book is about. 1980 Black Women's Volume was finding Black women scholars writing about Black women, not out of a deficit model, but out of a model that speaks to who we are as women. And not bad mouthing anybody. I don't have to take down anybody to lift myself
There you go. You don't have to do that. That's for sure. That's for sure.
But Dr. Francis, I have another question for you. You talked about chronological talked about the civil rights movement going through FIST. And I love FIST. I visited there before and I was stationed in Nashville. So I know FIST University. But in the sit-ins and the civil rights movement, and you talked about women and being a feminist. So my first question would be is, in today, this century, do we need another civil rights movement? And then the second question would be, what would you tell women that live in our Confederate states that don't even own their own bodies?
Live where?
In the Confederate states, in the red states, that don't even own their own bodies. They're having they have less rights as far as birth control and what they're going to do with their own bodies. What would you tell them?
That's the law of the land now. So, Supreme Court already upset as so. So women in general
Yes.
don't have control of their own bodies.
Well, in half.
So IBWC, for an example, have had probably 4 different conferences over the last 40 years about the violence against Black women. And so that's an ongoing kind of struggle for us to control our own bodies and for us to speak up for our own selves. So that's just real. Do we need another civil rights movement? No, we need a liberation struggle.
Yes. Yes.
It's not about civil rights, never was about civil rights. It's about justice. And so whatever we can do to bring down the walls of oppression, then that's what we need to do. And yeah, is it a long struggle? Yes. Whatever books you read, including the Bible, will suggest to you that it's a long struggle.
It is, that's for sure.
And as Martin says, the arc is wide, but it still moves toward justice. And so for my life then, I've bounced around to a lot of different universities and all those places just because I wanted to maintain my own voice. And there's some people who are in spaces where they tiptoe through their lives because they're putting more emphasis on having a paycheck than struggling for this justice. So I think we then let the 1960s, when we had a fervor, or even the sit-ins and all of that radical stuff that the young people were doing in the, all the way from the 50s and the 60s and even to the 70s. So some young people today talking like, oh, I can't do anything, I'm just whatever age. But then you go back.
That's right.
Look
It's
at our
always
history.
been children who started the movement. Every movement. Children are the leaders of those movements.
So I would say to people, one, you got to know who you are.
Exactly.
And if you don't know your history, then you can't do anything.
Can't do a thing.
Your history, as James started off this conversation, your history started in wherever you were born, with the parents that birthed you, and what did you do going forward? You see, so that's what I would probably say.
And LaFrancis, we can't let you go without talking a little bit about your Princeton experience. I think educators of your caliber tend to move around to different universities, like you said, because you want to have your own voice. And some places are not, are not the greatest place for you to have your own voice. And I think Princeton, you spent pretty much the most time Princeton than you did at any other university. Tell us a little bit about that experience and
well, I got to Princeton because Princeton had just started what we might call integrating or letting in a large group of Black students. And that was the year of 1969, coming out of 1968 in the killing and the murder of Martin Luther King. So coming from out of that and the fervor and the burning down of properties and all that concern, as they wanted to settle that, this whole then push of letting Black students into historical white universities came about. You ask any of us who got a degree prior to 1970, and I would say 85 to 90% had graduated from historical Black colleges. We didn't even have the name historical Black colleges. We just went to college.
That's right. That's right.
I went to Morgan State University, and we had our relationships with other Black colleges. I didn't play any sports by the time I got to college. So I stopped everything, and I don't know what I did, but probably partied too much.
You studied to get all these degrees.
I eventually, I think it was my sophomore year that I said to myself, girl, you really can be smart if you want to be smart.
That's right.
And so from that sophomore year, because my freshman year at Morgan, I think I might have had a 2.1 or 2.2. After that freshman year, I never made less than a 3.8. Many semesters I was carrying 4.0 because that was the only way that I graduated with honors. And I only graduated then, if there were 32 of us, I was number 29.
Okay.
Just like, so one of the things I say to students today, if you can finish your freshman year with a 2.6 average, you can graduate 3 years later with honors.
Exactly.
But you can't blow that freshman year.
Mm-mm, mm-mm.
But James, so 69 then was a big year of Black students coming into white universities. For Princeton, the largest year might have been 1970. So where were they getting these students from? There was a national program called A Better Chance. Have one of you ever heard of that? A Better Chance?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so there was this organization started by a Black person. I think his name was Dr. Peterson, I'm not absolutely sure. But he recognized early on that there were a lot of gifted Black students who were not able to go to prep schools and colleges because of lack of money.
Right.
So he began to identify these students in this program, which is called A Better Chance. And so some of them, the vast majority of them, went to the top prep high schools in the country,
Mm-hmm.
like Phillips Academy or whatever, Exodus or whatever. I don't even know the names. It was beyond me. I'm an IC Malcolm High School graduate. But nevertheless, so that first group of students who came into Princeton were students who have been in these A Better Chance programs, but they come from working class backgrounds. So they would go to prep school in the 8th grade. So their 8th, 9th, 10th, 12th grade, they had mastered prep education. So when they got to Princeton, they were already at the top of the heap.
Mm-hmm.
And they were taking no prisoners
Mm-hmm.
because they are the ones who, and so my first, I don't know, from 1973, probably until about 80, 81, I had these radical students that used to say to me, LaFrancis, we don't know what we're going to do with you because you're like just too much straddling the line. We're going to have to, Now, I still, whoever I am, I just stuck to who I was. I'm still who I am. And so, so I've had some really great students. Somebody said, well, did you teach Michelle Obama? I don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember Michelle Robinson,
Mm-hmm.
but I say to my children, they'd be laughing at me. I said, well, I was the core faculty member in Black Studies at Princeton for 15 years.
Okay.
We didn't have no department.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm teaching 4 classes a year.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going to get a certificate in Black Studies, which Michelle Obama had,
Mm-hmm.
she had to take one of my classes.
Uh-huh.
But, I'm teaching too many students because they're all coming through. But hindsight now, this, as we are right now, I've got one of my former students who is a full professor at Columbia University, psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's now pulling together a journal issue of a health wellness journal issue in my honor of a paper called The Dominant Values in Black Culture that I wrote in 1972. Now, where did that paper come from? It came out of Portsmouth, Virginia.
All right now.
Living on Queen Street in the 9 and 800 block, going up to Green Street. After that, you're going to cross over. White people don't cross over.
That's right. That's right.
And so she's bugging me to get some writing out that I still have to give her. But I've got 2 former Princeton students who are deans of law school, both female, deans of law schools. At one is at the University of Iowa, where I got my doctorate, and the other one is at the University of Colorado. I've got one, my favorite, he loves me to death. He's now going to be the president of one of the small Presbyterian colleges in New Jersey, Dr. Caldwell. Got one writer who says that she writes about Black women because I taught her about Black women. Michelle Obama's very best friend was one of my favorite students. So I see that kind of relationship. Oh, I taught, what's this child's name? She's a congresswoman from Alabama.
Not Sewell, not no, not Terry, wouldn't be Terry. Oh, no, you're talking about
Tara Sewell.
Terry Sewell, yes.
Yeah, Tara Sewell. I wrote.
I got one of her buddies on here now from Alabama, Angela Webb. She's on here now listening.
Well, I wrote one of Tara's references.
Yes.
For her, whatever that year she spent in England.
Uh-huh.
And I wasn't formally an advisor on her senior thesis, but I read her senior thesis. When I first got to Princeton, they had not quite gotten the aha moment of what it meant to have me there. So they were letting me be on senior thesis and junior thesis. And I guess they woke up one day and somebody said, she can't be a reader or she can't chair a committee because she's not a full-time professor. So they kicked me off of that.
Oh, wow. Wow.
But so I informally advised a number of students, going forward. So I know one is a couple of judges, so that group of those early Princeton students who still was coming from out of the movement and has spent, in fact, my former president of the organization, I had been with since she was 19. She was just really well known in Denver, and I'm told about the name of school after her. She just died last year. So if you go Denver and you Google the Bailey plan, Sharon Ruth Bailey. So yeah.
I got one question for you, Dr. Rose, and I know that you have written extensively about the Black culture, about Black families, about Black women. But tell me, what is the purpose and the makings of this book? Every Black woman should wear a red dress.
Absolutely. Got to wear a red dress, but it could be orange. Could be yellow. Could be green. But what it means is that we have to put on our colors.
Amen.
Now, when I first wrote the book, it's a book, the book has a title, but when I first did the paper, so, it was like, wasn't shocking, but to sort of jolt us back into, this is who we are. We wore our colors. We mixed it up however we wanted to.
However we wanted to wear it.
And you can see it still in our culture.
Yes, yes.
Every Black woman should wear a dress. It doesn't have to be red. But red goes all the way back to ancient Egypt when they talk about the woman with the red plume.
That's right. That's right.
You see? So, but yeah, so that was one of my first papers that I really liked, where I was just trying to define us as being the original women that God created when he or they said, let me make man, woman, put them in Africa. They were both jet black.
That's right.
And going forward, So, yeah, that's what that's about.
LaFrancis, and we winding down. I know we're gonna go over just a little bit, but I think I saw a picture or read somewhere where you kind of rubbed shoulders with Stokely Carmichael during your travels at one point.
Yes, because of that early movement there, like that 1958, 59.
At this
60. So although I did not go south, I went to DC. And so there was a lot of fervor in DC. Although I was married, my husband was just the opposite of me. I know my aunt looked and said, because sometimes you don't know. And I said, well, I don't want anybody like my daddy was. So then I go and get the opposite. But I used to get him into trouble because he also had his doctorate. And I just making noise, and they would say his name was Rose, and they would say Dr. Rose said this, and Dr. Rose. One day he said to me, "Would you please identify what Rose is speaking. And he was a nice kind of straight-laced English professor. I met him at Morgan at one time. I mean, he graduated magna cum laude. But I was in the class with him and took this exam, and I had a score higher than his. So he made a mistake to want to see what did I say on my paper that he didn't say. And so the rest is history. So, Jim, I forgot the question you asked me. Tell me.
Stokely Carmichael.
Stokely Carmichael.
Stokely. Yeah, so I don't know when I met Stokely, but I know him early on, and such that, I know maybe, particularly I know in the 80s, early 80s, we were having our national conference, the International Black Women's Congress, was having our conferences in Washington, D.C. for like the first 10 years. And we would always have them the same weekend as the Congressional Black Caucus.
Black Caucus, yeah.
And at that point, they still had the Howard Inn. So we were having ours. It just put, when it was first built, it was a Harambee House, right? And then when it was going down, then Howard University bought the hotel. So I am sure that picture that you saw was Stokely, kind of like semi hanging out with us at the Howard Inn.
He spent quite a bit of time on Howard's campus.
Oh yeah, Stokely did. Yeah. So, but I knew him well enough that when he was really sick and, somebody called, stuff, but yeah.
Thank you. And as we wind down, we always say to our guests, and it's true because we always have to have you back because, wanted to have you on a long time ago. And at the time we just had the morning show and you told me I'm not a morning person. We're gonna have to record this or do something. And then when we got the evening shows, you were always on my mind. And then, the Women's History Month came by. I said, well, she has to be a part of this because she is women's history.
She is indeed.
This is the time when we as hosts have our final comments and things like that. And then you can have a final comment at the end of this, but whoever wants to start, they can give you a final.
Chapman, Colonel.
Or if you have a question, you have a final question.
I'll end and say that it has been an honor talking to you and talking about the history that you have a livid history, and you just keep living and keep making history. And I'll end it like that.
Well, Dr. Rose, I have admired you for years and years and years and years. And I have followed you from afar. And I've always wanted to join the International Congress. And I always told myself every year I was going to join, and I never got around to it. Procrastination is a terrible thing. But I want to say that I have followed you, I admire you, and as I said at the beginning of this segment, you have done exactly what Mr. Norcom envisioned for the students at IC Norcom High School. And once again, I know that he's smiling down on all of the accomplishments that you have made. And you make me Greyhound proud just to have you here and to see all the things that you've done. I thought I knew about you. But my goodness, there is so much more to find out. So I want to say I'm so thankful that you chose to come on. I called you not long ago because I thought you were related to the Rodgers from the class of 1926. But you see, he was a valedictorian then. But
I said Lee Rodgers.
Lee Rodgers, yes, but you were not a part of that Rodgers family. So, but I'm just so proud to say that you're a Norcom graduate and you really make my heart sing.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I just like to say, LaFrancis, you're not only my heart transplant buddy, you are truly my dear friend. And I have treasured every moment since we met. And sometimes it's gaps in between the time when we communicate, but it's never because, I've forgotten, you or the love you showed for me early on during my heart issues. And that meant so much to me then and gave me so much encouragement that I could make it through that. And we appreciate that. And we've only scratched the surface of
Yes.
the
Yes.
accomplishments and the things that you have done. And Leah mentioned about Waters, he would be proud about one of his Norcom students, but a lot of that came from you. A lot of what you've done came from within inside of you. It was started at an early age. If you had the nerve to approach my 6'4", 250-pound dad, that said a lot for you back then, So I have to give you credit for doing that. But anyway, we want to have you back again, and I'm gonna put on our page, our Portsmouth Coffee Talk Facebook page, all this information that I have, so people will know all the things that you've done. I think you deserve the recognition. You have gotten a lot of it, but there's still a lot of people that don't know what you've done, especially our younger generation come up. And we're not going to let Yonkins or DeSantos or any of those red state guys, keep us from passing on our history the way it should be taught. So once again, I thank you for coming on, and we appreciate you, and we look forward to having you back at any time. Now that we have these evening shows, I know that will be a compliment to you.
Thank you so much. I've enjoyed talking to you.
Yes.
And I'm just honored, really honored to be first an IC Norcom graduate.
Mhm.
It's the foundation of who I am. I am glad that I came by at the time that I did, when teachers believed that everybody could read,
Right, that's right.
and that everybody could succeed.
Mhm.
And so there are so many Norcom alumni that have done great things coming out of what they call a segregated, and I would say great,
Mhm.
great school.
Mhm.
Well, thank you so much. And that's so appropriate as we having a grand reunion this year, celebrating many, many years of IC Norcom's existence.
Yes, indeed.
So thanks again. And Portsmouth Coffee Talk is here for our voice.
For our community,
In our community.
our future, Colonel. It's okay, girl.
Francis, we salute you. That's why
We salute you, Dr. Rose.
Thank you.
We salute you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody. And watch Monday as our next guest will be during Women's History Month is Dr. Andrea Frazier Warren. And she was an educator, but her retired educator, but she's president and CEO of the Virginia Symphony Orchestra, the first African-American woman to hold that position. So, and if the Warren name sounds familiar, tune in Monday, you'll see why that sounds familiar, who she's related to.
Thank you, Dr. Francis. Thank you so very much.